Still fits.
I see that.
Been a little while, but it still works.
There you go.
Um, okay. On my screen now, can you see thank you for joining us? The meeting will begin at 6 p.m.
Roger.
Okay. Okay.
I see it. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Okay, so I think this is what we're going to have between, for the first couple minutes before it starts, is just this banner.
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
Perfect. That'll be much better.
Yes. Oh my
People were
goodness.
kind of confused
Now,
before.
it does say live on Facebook right now.
Mhm.
Is that going over? Is that on somebody's account right now?
I'm streaming that live right now, and technically the audio is probably coming through, so bear in mind that you're on a hot mic.
That's okay.
Hello.
Okay, brilliant. Wow, but it still works. There you go.
I missed that. I'm brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. You got the lighting. The lighting behind me keeps changing. So
Mine is awful right now. Hold on.
So we are live, guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Hello, Facebook. We're waiting for our meeting. We'll begin at 6 o'clock.
Yep.
Maybe.
Board members, you all can mute your mic, and you can actually mute your video if you choose until we get there.
Okay, I'm gonna check the lighting. That's better. Okay, good.
3-minute warning, everyone. Good evening, board members. When you're ready, we can start the meeting. You'll need to unmute yourselves when you speak, as we practiced in last week's meeting. And we will bring panelists in and out of the meeting, which I think you have had an explanation from Charlie and Nicole about how that's going to work this evening. So when you need a panelist to speak, I'll have to bring them into the meeting for you to speak to them. We have a few already queued up and ready to go. So Elise, I'll turn it over to you whenever you're ready. Just give me the thumbs up and we can start the meeting.
All right, do we have everyone here? I can't see. I can't tell. Are all the board members with us?
Let me run a count here.
At least if you scroll the little button, you can see everybody that's logged in.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Oh, okay. Let me just change. Okay, I had it on a weird. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, good.
And you will also get the gallery view back once Tom drops his screen share of the meeting. So at least when you're ready to go, you tell me. I will hit the record button
Okay,
and begin managing.
I'm ready.
Okay, I am going to hit the record button. We are live. Tom, you can drop your screen share.
Good evening, everybody. I call the April 8th, 2020 electronic meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Do we have any opposed? Okay, and by a unanimous vote, we are, the agenda is adopted, Madam Clerk. So since we are meeting electronically, our Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be a little different. It will be electronic too. So we will essentially be pledging to a pixel flag. Tonight's pledge leader is Gabriel Schul. He's the student advisor to the board. Gabe has been serving as our student advisor since January of this year. Gabe is a native of Charlotte and a junior at Ardrey Kell High School. He is active in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council, as well as student government, the speech and debate team, and the band. Gabe, I now turn to you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Is Gabe with us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the
Of the
United States
of America,
America.
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That was new. So we now move to requests from the public. And since we are currently convening our meetings electronically, in order to continue to have requests for the public, we have given potential speakers the option of joining the meeting electronically. They could either join us through the Zoom platform, or they could email us their comments with a minimum 375-word limit in advance of this meeting. We did not have any speakers sign up to join the meeting electronically, but we did receive 2 emails. And so the standard rules for these comments will apply and are as follows. Each speaker's comments may address any topic of their choice except for individual student matters or specific personnel matters. No personal attacks will be allowed, and neither profanity nor similarly inappropriate language may be used. And with that, Madam Clerk, would you please read the 2 emails into the record at this time?
Yes. Public comment number 1, received from Sarah Chastity, and I quote, "Hello, has CMS considered reopening elementary schools only if they cannot reopen all schools in May? Denmark and Norway have announced some easing of restrictions, including allowing elementary schools to reopen. The thought behind this is because elementary schools have small population pulling from one contained geographic area. They are not reopening high schools right away because the high school pulls from multiple communities and risk of spreading virus higher. I am a parent to 2 CMS students, and my 5th grader is struggling with distance learning. I believe the approach Norway and Denmark are using is worth considering in our region, as we are not a hot spot for coronavirus. Thank you, Sarah Chastity." Public comment number 2, received from Braxton G. Begoats, and I quote, "Good evening, Chairwoman Dashew, Vice Chairwoman Byers-Bailey, and members of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. Tonight, I wanted to take the time to publicly thank you all for the swift decision that you made in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. While I know that these decisions have not been easy, I am grateful that you took bold and sometimes difficult votes in order to make sure that our students, families, and staff were protected. Thank you for being bold and doing what you thought was in the best interest of all involved parties. Additionally, thank you for working with our governmental partners, the County Commission, state legislator, and the State Board of Education to get everyone the answers we needed. I, for one, am grateful to have dedicated public servants and educators like you on the Board of Education in times of pandemic. We may not always agree, and we may not always get every decision right, but when we work together, the ability to make positive, thoughtful decisions is endless. In closing, I hope that this is not the only time that each of our governmental entities work together, but that the partnerships formed during this time are continuously utilized. Yours in service, Braxton G. Bigotes.
Thank you. So this ends our request from the public. Colleagues, we also have 2 public hearings tonight, and the rules are as follows. Each speaker's comment may only address the topic that is the subject of the public hearing. No personal attacks will be allowed. Individual student matters or specific personnel matters may not be discussed, and neither profanity nor similarly inappropriate language may be used. Our first public hearing is regarding policy BDD on superintendent and board relations. We've received 1 email in advance for this public hearing. Madam Clerk, will you please read that email into the record at this time?
Yes. Public hearing comment received from Braxton G. Bigotes, and I quote, Chairwoman Dashew, Vice Chairwoman Byers-Bailey, and members of the board. This evening, I rise in strong support of policy BDD, Superintendent Board Relations. To me, this is a needed policy in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and I support the policy and the regulation that is to follow on communication protocols between the superintendent and the board as a mechanism to help all parties, the superintendent, the Board of Education, and the public understand who they need to contact in order to have matters of concern addressed. It is my strong hope that the Board of Education will pass the policy at the appropriate time. The superintendent will release the regulation and that both items are quickly and efficiently relayed to the greater Charlotte-Mecklenburg community to provide clarity on communication protocols in CMS. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I look forward to swift passage of this policy that clearly defines what communication protocols will exist between the superintendent and the Board of Education. Yours in service, Braxton G. Bigotes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bigotes, by way of Madam Clerk. Okay, our next public hearing is on the superintendent's 2020 to 2021 budget recommendations.
Chair, would you please declare that public hearing closed?
Absolutely. Yep. Sorry about that. I declare this public hearing closed. Okay. So regarding the public hearing for the 2020-2021 budget recommendations, Madam Clerk, are there any speakers for this public hearing?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing there are no speakers, I declare this public hearing closed. So that ends the public hearing portion of our agenda. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
I hear a motion from Thelma Byers-Bailey. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Carol Sawyer. Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this item for individual consideration? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Do we have any opposed? Okay, Madam Clerk, that carries by unanimous vote, 9-0. Okay, colleagues, we have one very important action item tonight. Before we take action, I'm going to turn to the superintendent to introduce this item and make a recommendation to the board. And that's you, Mr. Superintendent. Remember to unmute yourself.
All right, here I am. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I apologize about that. I wanted to be able to share information about a plan that we're proposing for board approval tonight around premium pay. And so I want to begin by outlining some details about that plan. And then I will certainly invite Christine Peugeot, who's our Chief Human Resources Officer, to provide any feedback that that she may have. So with that, Madam Chair, I will go ahead and begin sharing that information. Sorry, I'm gonna grab a cup of water. Okay. So as I mentioned, I want to share a plan that is focused on providing premium pay to our employees who help us carry out the district's essential functions during this COVID-19 crisis. Just as a reminder, I want to share that some essential functions that the governor called out in his executive order include remote learning, as well as preparing and serving meals to all students. As you know, CMS received about $2.4 million in state COVID funding, and there are 4 categories that were outlined that these funds can be used for. Those include meal continuity, sanitation, remote learning, as well as childcare. The plan that we're proposing for board approval tonight will cover about 900 employees and will cost just a little bit more than $1.3 million. This plan, if approved, would begin Monday, April the 12th, and go through May 15th. The incentive is to offer any employee who must work on site time and a half pay. We've also included a stipend, which is a very small portion of the amount, about $25,000, but that stipend would be used for some exempt or non-hourly employees who have to also perform some essential functions. We picked that time period, April the 12th through May 15th, because it is, or at least the May 15th end date is the period that we're working from right now. If that actually changes, then we would need to come back and have an additional conversation about that. But I feel, and my entire team feels very strongly, that our employees who are on the front lines doing the work that keeps us open, they're extremely important. And last week we shared some emergency leave options that are available for our employees. And we know that we have some employees who have taken advantage of that benefit. We have no way of knowing how many more will actually use that leave. And that's an option that they have and we want them to have, but we want to make sure that these employees who choose to work have an incentive. And so, Madam Chair, that is my recommendation for approval tonight.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify one thing, Mr. Superintendent. You mentioned Monday, April 12th, and actually April 12th is a Sunday. So does this start Sunday, April 12th, or does it start Monday, April 13th?
Monday, April 13th. Thank you for that clarification.
All righty, that's Easter Sunday and my daughter's 22nd birthday, so. Do we have any questions? Ms. Sawyer, I see your hand. Dr. Jones, you'll be next.
Well, I was going to make a motion before we discuss, but.
Well, yeah, let's do we get our questions answered first, and then we can have a motion and then have just further discussion after the motion. So Dr. Jones? You're muted, ma'am. You got to unmute, Dr. Jones, in the left corner of your screen.
Okay.
There
Can you hear
are.
me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I simply want to applaud the plan. I am very happy with what he's just presented. So no questions, no criticisms, just applauding this initiative.
Great. Ms. Marshall? Oh, you're muted, Ms. Marshall.
Sorry about that. So I'm in agreement as well with Dr. Jones. I think this is a great step for us. But just some clarification here. We've got, most of these folks are in food continuity or meal continuity for our students. And today, I know that we serve 37,000 meals. So this is a needed service. I spoke with Kathy Beam today, and she indicated that number. Let me ask this. Some of the folks that have taken leave might find this attractive. Could folks that had just made a decision, could they make another decision as we go forward? Because I know some folks can't work in the cafeteria that they are assigned to. So I know we're doing some moving around of folks. Is that possible for some to come off a leave status and go back into active work?
And
Christine, is that a
Christine question, or is that a Ernest? Ernest, you're muted if that is for you.
Ernest, you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
I'm sorry, Margaret. Christine will actually take that question.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, good evening. Yes, that is correct. Employees who have already taken advantage of other leave options, if their position has changed and they are interested in coming back to work, that certainly is an opportunity for them. However, there are a finite number of positions at each site. So again, this program is intended to provide those employees extra pay who are coming on site to work to perform those essential functions. So in the event that we had more employees say, well, now I would like to opt into this, there could be a situation where we're taking employees back on a first come, first served basis.
Okay. And again, I think we have close to 70 sites. Is that correct, that we're trying to staff?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Shipp? And unmute yourself.
Yes, I also want to applaud this. I think this is really great for our employees, especially those that's been on the front lines. And I think when Margaret, you were asking that questions, I wondered if you were looking at making sure those that have been on the front line, that have been doing it, would be the first ones that we would look at in terms of this, because some will come back who maybe have not been already there. And should they, even if they're first to say they want to do it, would that override those who've already been on the front line doing this? And really, I feel like they would be more deserving. I mean, it's just something to think about.
Understood. The logical application would be to continue to pay and keep employed those people on site who are currently doing the work. However, in recent days, we've faced a challenge where we knew that we may need to start consolidating sites if we didn't take extra measures to be able to ensure that we can continue at the same pace. And this for sure is one of those measures that we are taking. So yes, while other employees would be welcome to come back should there be spots available for them, we are going to first keep on site those employees who have been there on the front lines day after day supporting this program. And they deserve an incredible amount of kudos for doing that on behalf of all of the students that we serve.
Thank you.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Yes, I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's a great step forward to to reward employees who have done a stellar service on behalf of our schools and our students. I'm really pleased that we are able to do this.
Ms. Cheek?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy for this. You know, I'm very blessed. I have a niece and a nephew, and they're both frontline employees also, and their employers have also done this sort of thing. One of them works at Amazon and the other works at one of our larger grocery stores locally. So I think this is the right thing to do because other industries that are in the same situation are doing it. I wish we had more than $2.4 million, but I'll talk about that another time. A lot.
All right, anybody else? Scanning the screen. All right, so do we have
Wait,
a
Mr. Strain has one.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
So the $2.4 million allocation, where did that come from? Did that come from the General Assembly? Where did that funding come from?
Most of this funding is associated with the COVID-19 funding, and I would of course defer to our CFO for if that has a special title associated with it. But that was the primary funding source for being able to promote this program.
But the virus isn't a funding source. So I'm sorry, who has allocated the money?
Oh, go ahead, Sheila, sorry.
Sorry. This particular allocation that they're referring to, the 2.4 million, is an allocation from the state. It was labeled COVID-19 supplemental funding, and it's intended to address additional expenditures that districts are incurring in light of the fact that schools have been closed. And the there's 4 areas that were addressed. One is child nutrition, one is childcare, remote learning costs, as well as sanitation.
Okay, and so this is an appropriation by the General Assembly or DPI or?
Well, it came to us through the state. My understanding is that they made some redirections of some other funding that they had available. One of the key areas was the summer reading, is my understanding.
Okay, so the 4 areas, the 2.4 million covers the 4 areas. Of the 1.3 million, what is the spread of the 1.3 million across those 4 areas then?
We have not committed any funding at this point to that funding source until this recommendation. And of the 1.3 million that was stated for the full cost of this, about 2/3 of that cost, or a little over $800,000 of that cost, is associated with the meal continuity program. So,
okay, so
that would be, you know, associated with the child nutrition continuing to offer that program.
right, thank you. So the 2/3 is allocated to that line item for child nutrition. And what about the other 1/3? Where does the other 1/3 fall in terms of these buckets?
It would not be charged to this. If you the remainder of that funding will have to come from vacancy dollars.
Okay, so the additional funding we're talking about is not coming from the 2.4 million then?
Correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
so the 1.3 million that covers anyone who must work on site, 2/3 of that is a result of the meal continuity and can be charged back against the 2.4 million.
Correct.
But the additional funding cannot, right?
Correct.
Is there a plan? And my math isn't brilliant, but I'm guessing there's about 1.5 left then of the 2.4. Is there a plan for the 1.5 across these other areas, sanitation, remote learning, or childcare?
We have not defined anything specific at this point.
Okay. So do we know what our requirements are in those areas? Given that this funding source we talked about was to cover those 4 areas, do we have any idea what our requirements are in those areas? For example, remote learning?
What I would say at this point is that we do not have a fully computed list of totals, but things that have presented themselves already, such as printing of the packets or adding additional licenses, that those kinds of costs for class credit recovery and those kinds of things. Those costs have thus far been absorbed within the departmental budgets, but we will reach a point that that will not be possible. And, we are continuing to collect those costs that are coming up in addition to our normal operating costs. And we'll be continuing to work through that.
Okay, so the number of people, did we say there was roughly 900 staff that would be eligible for this?
That's correct.
And
It's give or take 20, 25 numbers. We actually budgeted a worst case scenario example. So that's why that's an approximate number.
Okay, I understand. So which roles are we talking about now? We've got folks obviously on the meal continuity plan, which there's certainly been recognition of, and rightly so. What other roles are we talking about here in terms of those 900 staff?
That is correct. The vast majority of staff are supporting meal continuity, roughly 2/3 of the projected expenses to fund this program. The other core essential work, I would say the second biggest bucket is around payroll. So making sure that we continue to pay all of our employees, not only this premium pay plan, but their regular earnings and salaries across our 19,000 employees. Some of that requires employees to come on site physically to do that work because it requires specialized equipment to be deployed and VPN access across all of our different work sites, which we are not equipped to do. So there was time built in to allow those payroll coordinators at every site to come in for only the time necessary required to be on site. Some of the other work centers around technology functions that are required to support the meal continuity programs and things such as device deployment to students, and also our critical area of security for all of our campuses, not only at the meal sites, but across the district.
And what is in terms of this plan then for these 900, and I appreciate you enumerating those different roles, right? Because it's important that we recognize that, folks that we have working on site are not just the folks associated with the meals and school nutrition, but these other key roles as well that are certainly essential for the function of and operation of the district. What level of pay are we offering then for time on site?
The level of pay would be time and a half for non-exempt workers, which is the far majority. The small number of exempt staff would be paid a stipend for the total period of $500.
Okay. Okay, I look forward to hearing more about the 2.4 million. I know that one of the items that we've identified is the fact that our classroom staff has taken on quite some cost themselves in order to set up virtual classrooms. Obviously, we've provided devices and whatnot, but many of them have had to acquire other equipment in order to properly carry forward their missions as classroom teachers in this virtual environment. And so I look forward to hearing more about how we go about looking after them as well, and the investments in the areas of sanitation, remote learning, and childcare that this was budgeted for. Thank you.
Oh, okay, Ms. De La Hara, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Schul. And Ms. De La Hara, you're muted. Okay,
Yes,
there you go.
thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to maybe get an example of what a role would be for an exempt employee who would be considered for this $500 stipend. I know you mentioned like the payroll coordinators, but I wasn't clear if that was a non-exempt traditional role or exempt, and maybe hoping you could provide some examples of what an exempt role would be.
Yes, certainly. So for payroll, we have, for example, a payroll director who would be an exempt position that is actually coming on site to facilitate processing those batches that requires that level of expertise to be able to oversee that and complete that work. And in terms of like front lines out in the community, we also have supervisors in the food service areas, so area managers who are supporting direct boots on the ground, the meal continuity plan. So those are people that have been on site undergoing tremendous efforts to be able to keep us serving meals to kids. And some of those positions, not the majority, but some of those are exempt level who are handling the coordination and also participating in actually handing out and delivering those meals.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Mr. Shul,
I was going to ask, so about how many staff are there per site?
per feeding site?
Yeah.
So now that varies depending on the level of need at some of the different sites. We do also have custodial, Mr. Strain, when I addressed your question earlier, I did not include custodial and maintenance. We do have custodial staff that are deployed at those feeding sites as well. I want to say, I could be mistaken, but it's approximately 2 to 3 custodial staff. We also have at some sites, depending upon the need for device deployment that we're doing in conjunction, we also have technology staff at those sites. So really it varies based upon the need, but I would have to defer to some of my other colleagues to get more specific, to a specific answer on that question.
And Christine, I would add to what you just shared is that in addition to some of the frontline workers that you see from school nutrition services, we also have staff who are in the kitchen preparing the meals. So they may not be visible, but they're on the site preparing the meals to be distributed to families and students.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that the staff were distributed in accordance with the need of the students. So then my next question was going to be like, are staff assigned to the work sites that they are normally closest to, like the work site normally closest to their school?
Typically, yes. However, child nutrition management staff works closely with their team because we are not operating at every single school site to be able to coordinate and deploy staff accordingly. And yes, one of the considerations is whether or not those sites are close to the employees' homes.
Okay. So then my last question was just going to be, if staff are missing in one site, but we find an excess of staff volunteering for this increased stipend in another site, would they be reallocated according to like need there?
Absolutely. In fact, in the last couple of days, we've faced sort of the opposite challenge where we've needed to deploy, we were stretched thin to be able to deploy staff and cover all the areas that we needed to cover. But yes, it's absolutely based on need. And our food services directors and executive directors do an excellent job with reallocating services as needed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did I see your hand, Ms. Marshall?
Yes, I just want to make one more comment. I think it's important for folks to know that we've gotten guidance on everything from the state until the May 15th. So this proposal, as I understand it, goes from the 13th of April to May 15th. Is that correct? Okay.
And so if the state deems that we are staying out of school past May 15th, then we will have a bridge to cross at that point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like a motion?
Yes, is there a motion to approve the premium compensation plan as recommended by the superintendent?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, that was motion by Carol Sawyer, seconded by Lenora Shipp. Do we have any more discussion before we vote? And I will just say that I have tried my best to get out to visit 4 or 5 feeding sites a day, simply to lay eyes on our employees from a distance, from a safe distance, and to thank them for the heroic work that they are doing, because they are showing up and they are making sure that our kids get fed. And you know, of course, as a public school district, our core business is teaching and learning, but I don't think people understood until this shutdown how many of our students rely on our schools for the most basic things, such as food to put in their bellies. So folks have been leaving their own kids at home, lining up childcare for their own kids, going out in public, which is it is a risk right now, in order to make sure that our kids eat. And I am so grateful for that heroic work. And these are some folks who don't get paid very much. So the fact that we can offer them, you know, what I've heard another institution call a hero bonus makes me feel very good. So with that, all in favor of the motion, let's see, actually, I'm going to have Madam Clerk call for the votes. And you're on mute.
Okay, all in favor?
Well, actually, no, if you'll do a roll call,
Okay, all right. Chairperson Dashu,
I'm in favor.
Ms. Byers Bailey,
In favor?
Jennifer De La Hoya,
Yes, in favor.
Ms. Ship Sanders.
I'm in favor,
Sanders
yes.
Ship.
That's fine, yes.
Dr. Ruby Jones,
In favor?
Ms. Carol Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Margaret Marshall,
Yes.
and Sean Strain.
Aye. You got Ms. Cheek?
And Rhonda Cheek, yes.
Oh, yes.
No, I did not. Ms. Rhonda Cheek, I apologize.
That's okay.
All right. So the motion, Madam Clerk, the motion passes by a vote of 9-0, and that is unanimous. So thank
Thank
you
you.
all very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we will begin our work session regarding the 2020-2021 budget with a report from the superintendent and staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. One of the questions that we talked about at the last board meeting was, is this the right budget at this time? And so one of the things that I anticipate we will have a conversation about tonight and going forward is taking into consideration some things that you all may have heard from your constituents or elsewhere, as well as considering the unusual times that we find ourselves in right now. And that really is an acknowledgement to the fact that when we created the budget recommendation, we did so largely prior to the pandemic. So I also think it's important to share some context about our conversations with our county partners, about the financial impact that they're experiencing, particularly around sales tax revenues. And they have shared with us as a result of the impact they're experiencing and anticipating that we should expect a flat budget. So that's a consideration that we'll also need to ponder as we ultimately make the ask to our county partners. I want to begin this part of the conversation by just acknowledging that we received a number of questions from our board members. And I want to thank you all for your engagement in sharing those questions with us. And what we'd like to do is have staff respond to some of your specific questions. I will start with Sheila, but I will also say that if there are additional questions, we'd be more than happy to answer those questions at the end. And given the virtual environment that we're in, we'll try to do this as efficiently as possible. So with that, I will turn to Sheila Shirley.
Thank you, Superintendent. So like Ernest said, I'm going to basically just try to read the question that was submitted and then share the response with each of you. So the first one was, I noticed that the tech support expenditures were budgeted to decrease, and I was surprised. And so looking at that line for tech support, and this is by purpose, that budget did decrease, but that was the result of the $3 million that we received in county funding this year for the modernization project. You may recall that was one-time funding. So that reduction, which was offset by the $1.3 million ask for this year, netted about a $1.7 million reduction in the tech support line. And in addition, there was a adjustment to carry over for school connectivity funding for this year for about $440,000. So combined, that was just over $2 million, and that was the decrease that's reflected on that page. The second question was about the modernization project itself, and I do want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that. Is anything possibly coming from the state, or is that not in the base budget? And the answer is yes, the provision for the state funding for the modernization project is assumed in the base budget. You may recall that we adopted that amount this year. What I will tell you is there's been a revision in the amount that they have indicated that we will now receive. You may recall that it was 13.9 million. And as recently as just a couple of months ago, or maybe not even that long, we started the discussions right before all of this happened. The state came back and have revised the amount that they will be providing for CMS directly, and it's up to 12 million. 5 million of that we expect to expend this year before June 30th on work that's already underway, and we'll be, actually processing payments to vendors, et cetera, for that work. So what that would mean is that we would need to secure the balance of that up to 12 million over the next 2 years for this project, projected to be at about 4.5 to 5 million next year, and then another 2.5 the next year. A second question in the same vein was, just as we think about that we need to make sure we understand what our ask is of the state, and why this is so important that we receive this funding, and make sure that everybody understands that. And I will tell you that the greatest risk that we're facing right now is that the state funding is basically approved for this year, even though it's an up to 12 million over 2 or 3 year period, 3 years. The greatest risk is that we're approaching June 30th, and if we don't get a state budget approved, or at least a micro budget to approve that funding for this program, then there will be no additional state funding available come July. And we are about 9 months away from go live on our HR and payroll component, the majority of the HR components. And so that's going to be a significant, concern and challenge, and it will be a huge waste of resources if we have to take a significant period of time for a pause while we wait for state funding to be approved. So clearly that is a challenge for us. I will just point out that there are several pilot districts that are in the same boat with us. All of us are well advanced into this project and trying to implement a statewide cloud solution. Several of them are on the Oracle platform that we're pursuing. And so we're less than 9 months away from go live, and very excited about it because we think it will provide a tremendous benefit to our district and to across the districts across the state. So just to summarize in terms of the budget component, we are expected to spend about 5 million of our 12 this year. And so that's pretty secured. They've given that funding and provided that for us to use, but we will need that additional 6 to 7 million over the next 2 years in order to complete the program. So then there was a question about where do we see the increase in English language learner support with the large increase in the student headcount. So if you were reviewing the document, you would have noticed that the English learners, I'll call them L students, that headcount did increase significantly. And we want to recognize it was about a 16% increase over last year in terms of headcount for that population. We are hopeful that we will receive additional funding in support of that. You all may recall that we receive state funding that augments our baseline funding to support this. What I have shared with you before, though, is that the LEP formula is pretty complicated, and it's a combination of a weighting of a 3-year average, with the most recent year being weighted the most heavily, but it also includes a component about a 50% indication for the concentration of the L population, which is not really information that we have. And until the state has all of their information, they're not really able to provide that. And when we did the budget proposal, we didn't have any of the planning numbers from the state, and frankly, at this point, still don't. I'm expecting that any time. But we essentially, because of the uncertainty of that state budget in and of itself, took the approach for this year to use the current year funding for state remember our current level funding, and then we applied any salary and benefit increases, the cost for those, because we assume that if that occurs, they will fund that. And so that's what you see reflected. So that's the reason there's no significant bump reflected in the L funding category. Obviously, if we see that the state funding does come in, or if we get a planning number, we can adjust that as we go into the to the adopted budget process. I noticed that the special funding, instructional support, and development had decreased, while the instructional expenses for special populations have increased. Again, this is on your purpose code analysis. So what I would share is that the 1920 adopted budget, which was the comparison year, had a one-time budget transfer to instructional support that's non-recurring, and so therefore that's not continuing. The instructional category for the special populations increased over the prior year, predominantly related to the salary and benefit costs associated with staff that are in that category. There was a concern raised, and this one actually I think may have been from our last meeting, about the competitive pay for custodians, and we were requested to provide what it would cost to actually increase the custodians, not just to the 1411 that's in our proposed budget, to move all of our non-exempt to a minimum pay of 1411, but also to move custodians to $15. We've estimated that cost at this time of about 2.7 million in additional funding that would be required. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. She's going to pick up where I left off. I think.
Ms. Elling, is that you?
She's muted. There she goes.
There you go.
Okay. Oh, you can, okay. Oh, I don't see myself. There we go. You hear me. Apologize. Board, good evening. This question relates to, again, special population funding, and it is related to additional teachers. So let me read you the question. Will the state not provide additional teachers with the increase in student headcount? And the question's referring to students that have students with disabilities. That's the headcount they're referring to. Secondarily, do they provide speech therapy funding? And the question indicates that they're surprised this is so dependent on local funding, meaning the special therapy and other services. So let me share with you how this is currently funded. The state does provide funding based on the April 1st exceptional children's headcount. That's why our schools work very hard to make sure we have every child accounted for. That each student in the child count is funded at the same rate. Related services such as speech, nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc., are not separately funded in this allocation. We can use state funding for related services, but funding is not provided specifically for services which vary according to the student's individual education plan. For example, a student could have speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and nursing services, but the funding for that one student is the same as all other funding. So it's funded on a per pupil, like per student allocation. Related services we have to pay for on top of that. Additionally, MEC pre-K classes, additional classes for MEC pre-K are going to open in 2021 with an approximate 70 more preschool students with disabilities who will require special education services. And also would like to add that there's another requirement that occupational therapists now must conduct a sensory evaluation per new state eligibility requirements for autism. So that also is requiring us to pay for additional evaluation services in that category because it's part of the state's autism category consideration. So I think next up, if I can say, well, I see my name still up there. Next up is Carol, I think. Is that right, Ms. Shirley? Carol has a couple questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Stamper, that's you, and it looks like you need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. So I have several questions that I'm going to go through. The first is regarding the assignment of custodians with the drastic changes related to COVID. And also, are we allowing overtime for custodians? So I will absolutely say that over the past several weeks, we've experienced unprecedented cleaning requirements, unlike we've ever known before. And indeed, we are talking about including those requirements, many of those, into our daily routine moving forward. I think we are in a new day. We have set a new norm, and we need to continue those. And we will be watching to see what impact, if any, that has on the current requirements and the allocations that may be needed to fulfill all of those cleaning, enhanced cleaning that we're doing today. Just quickly, many of you remember that we do have a benchmark for our quality of cleaning and the ratio of custodial staff to achieve that level of cleaning. Not to get into a lot of technical details, but there is a 5-tier cleaning model. If you'll remember, we've shared this with many of you. It's based on the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, or better known as APA. Our goal on that 5-tier is to have a quality of cleaning no lower than a level 3. So what does that mean? That means that we need enough custodians to be able to clean around 26,500 square feet per custodian or less. Right now, we are pushing 29,000 per square foot, per custodian. So obviously we are above that needed average. And so with this new introduction of our cleaning requirements, we are working hard to try to figure out, how do we correct this imbalance? What do we need to do to right this ship, so to speak? The last thing that I'll say on this particular question is, as we are evaluating the staffing formula, I'm going to make another plea, as often as we do, to you as the board, let's start addressing maybe the compensation and the level of job value for our custodians and the services that they provide, so we can begin to hire more quality custodians and retain those very quality custodians that we have today. So it's a two-prong effort here, I believe, as we move through this. So I appreciate the question. The next question is about our campus security associates that we have requested in your budget packet that the superintendent is making a recommendation. The requested additional 15 campus security associates, we are wanting to have them serve as our permanent and designated safety screening team. This would be for the random weapon screenings that we are currently conducting in our middle schools and our high schools that you are aware of, that we've started last year and moved into our middle schools this year. In addition, these individuals also will help us to respond to our crisis incidents across our K-8 middle and high schools. They will assist with our evacuation procedures as they may arise. This is similar to, if some of you remember, we used to have what we call a triage team, and they would go out on just as needed into our schools and would help on a daily basis. It wouldn't be something that was as predictable, but certainly needed for the response. And they will also probably be used for some short-term absences in our schools as those occur, and they do all too often. So that's part of the reason that we are requesting them, and some of the roles that this particular 15 campus security associates would be a value and added to our current team. The next question is that we continue to wonder how our poverty percentages have decreased when we have such a great increase in EL. And while the district has indeed seen an increase in our EL population, just a comment on that, the classification as an EL student doesn't automatically place the student in the poverty category, of course. We use the identified student percentage, or what we refer to as ISP. We use a lot of acronyms, data to measure our poverty. This measure looks at the families who are eligible, but the important thing is not only are they eligible, but they take the opportunity to apply to receive the food stamps or the temporary assistance to needy families, or what we call TANF. Our McKinney-Vento homeless and our foster students are also included in this ISP data. So what happens with that? At the state level, our DPI school nutrition matches the Power School information against the social services data in Raleigh. Our local school nutrition team does not manage, nor do we monitor or audit this. It comes straight from the state. And then that is populated into our system. And that's how we know how many students have actually qualified and are identified for these extra services, for these direct services. So the question, why have we seen a decrease? There's some theory about this. I don't know that we know the exact answers, but I will share with you what we feel. Across the nation, like in Mecklenburg County, of course, we've seen the number of people on food stamps and TANF decline over the past couple of years. Part of that is probably because our unemployment rate has also plummeted, which is a very good thing. And so we're not having as many folks that feel like they need to go and make those applications. I think families are making decisions for themselves. Certainly, we don't do a survey. We don't know all of the reasons why they are not applying, but there's also some discussion about the current policies in the current administration in Washington. And that could be a contributing factor to that decline. So I'm sorry I can't give you concrete, we are guaranteed that this is the reasons, these are the reasons for the decline, but hopefully that helps a little bit as we're discussing about and we have seen this trend across the nation. It's not just here in our own backyard, so to speak. The next question, let me get myself level set here. My last question for you is concerned with custodians' ability to properly clean facilities. And if our facilities are COVID standard, how will we keep up in this new day? This sort of relates to the first question that we had, but I will let you know, since the onset of our coronavirus event, our custodial services team has been actively cleaning and disinfecting more than we ever have. I mean, we have disinfectant product out there like we've never had, and they are using it daily. And they are emphasizing on the areas that are open to our staff and our public. They're wiping down those horizontal surfaces. They're cleaning and disinfecting the restrooms. They're disinfecting the common touch points like your door handles, things that we don't think about. But every time we touch it now, we may go, I wonder if that's clean. And so we are absolutely going behind and doing those high traffic areas more frequently and on a daily basis. We are also properly stocking. I know we had a lot of comments and a lot of concern initially about the stock of soap and paper towels and toilet paper. But over the past couple of weeks, particularly, we have gone in and taken the full inventory. And hopefully at this point, I can guarantee you that each of those dispensers, each of those toilet paper rolls are indeed stocked. And they will be when we receive our students and our staff back, hopefully mid-May. And that is the end of my questions, and I will pass it over to Derek Graham.
Derek Root.
Oh, Derek Root. Okay.
I'm sorry. You know what? Graham.
I knew you were talking about, Carol.
We hire someone new?
No, Derek Graham is an old friend of mine, and he was in DPI for years and years and years. And I apologize, Derek Root. You are also a friend of mine. So I'm passing it over to Derek Root.
Good evening, Superintendent Winston, members of the board. I did receive a few questions from the board as well. First question is regarding the proposed budget. Do we need to increase the technology budget because there will be some loss or damage of devices sent home? In writing, I talked about the number of devices that we have deployed through this crisis, over 80,000 in our inventory system, and we estimate that nearly 20,000 additional devices have gone out that have just been through quick handouts and drive-up situations at schools. Assuming that we're going to have some losses out of this level of a technology deployment, we have done some research on there's really no precedent for research on a crisis like this, but assuming that we could lose up to 15% of the devices that we have sent home, I would estimate the cost of replacing those devices to be between $1.5 and $2 million to bring us back to the one-to-one status we were at before this crisis. Again, some of this is speculation. We don't have a firm number on that because we really won't know. As far as damage of devices, we already are repairing these devices on a pretty regular basis anyway, so I don't see any additional costs in repairs. Next question I had was, another reason we might want more tech money is to average out the future lockdowns that we could potentially face from this. And do we want to go into the earlier grades? Today, CMS provides a device for every student from 4th grade to 12th grade. And we provide at least an extra 60 spares in every building. In our high schools, we typically do 90 spares. So we have a good number of devices distributed through the schools. We do not provide a one-to-one device in most cases for kids under 4th grade. But we do put iPads as our preferred device out in elementary schools. There's a variety of reasons for that. And Technology Services has been busily upgrading and replacing that fleet of iPads over the last 2 to 3 years. We have about 11,000 iPads out there today.
I think you may have lost your internet there, Derek. Are you still there?
Looking at deploying devices into the community in grades 1 through 3, we would need to buy about 25,000 additional iPads in order to get to the level of one-to-one and some spares that we need into our schools to deploy something like this again. The cost of those devices has to get added up with the cost of the case to put it in, because we're talking about little fingers, and a management license as well too. So all put together, we'd be looking at about $9.5 million to buy that number of devices. Also, we would probably need some additional support. So in my written response, I said that we would likely need a full-time employee at that point to manage a fleet of over 36,000 iPads. I also had a question talking about extending connectivity to our students that don't have internet connectivity today. We realize that's critical as our one-to-one device program. And how would we close the digital divide on internet access and take into account the student and device coverage with internet connectivity? So at this time, I'm really not comfortable giving an accurate prediction of the number of students lacking reliable internet connectivity at home. We have not really surveyed our population in the past for that information beyond what we've done in our high schools for the 1 million program that deploys hotspots. I do believe that in a few weeks, we're going to have a much clearer picture in this area than we ever had before as a result of this current crisis. And we are handing out hotspots left and right at this point in time. We've done nearly, by the middle of the month, when we've gotten through our latest round, we'll have done nearly 17,000 hotspots. So I can make some estimates on what it would cost to do more of that work. The monthly service fees on the hotspots that we've handed out to date are about $8 million when you add it up over the year to cover the service fees for those hotspots. And the cost of a mobile hotspot is about $75 to $100, placing the value of the devices we are currently deploying somewhere between $1.25 and $1.75 million. A few notes I included in my written response as well too is that we don't consider the devices we're handing out today CMS property because they've been donated to us and to our students. So we don't manage them in the same way that we manage like our Chromebook fleet that are taxpayer funded devices. So again, as I said with the iPads earlier, we would probably need to hire a dedicated staff member to sort of manage that level of effort with the with an internet connectivity effort and mobile devices. As you can guess, they're very small, they're very easy to lose and steal. So it takes a little bit of effort to manage those. And with that, I can hand the baton to Christine.
So Ms. Peugeot, that would be you.
Okay, good evening again. And yes, I have a question regarding our proposed investment in the employee market rate adjustment. That would be adjusting the minimum rates for our non-exempt staff. Wanting to understand those market rate comparisons and the impact of moving ultimately towards the $15 per hour. So basically, the county and other local and regional employers have taken action to raise their minimum wage. Further adjusting our minimum rates, if you recall, we had done an initial increase to $13.22. A further adjustment could strategically position CMS to successfully compete in the talent acquisition market, especially given some high turnover that we're experiencing with some of our non-exempt positions. We are recommending a phased approach. That's first to increase the minimum rate to $14.11. That's $14.11 for the 2021 school year, with a goal to further adjust to $15 an hour, budget permitting, in the second year. Now, in comparing the new minimum rates with market data collected in 2018, the vast majority of the positions would be appropriately placed once we made these adjustments. However, we have some positions, it's fewer than most, that currently appear to be positioned accordingly. However, with many of those positions, we need to keep in mind that we are experiencing high turnover. Some of those examples include ASAP assistants that are turning over at a rate of 50%. We have lunchroom assistants that experience a 55% turnover rate. Pre-K, K3 assistants are currently sitting at approximately 30%. And then our custodians, which were highlighted earlier by Ms. Stamper, are experiencing just over a 21% turnover rate. To date, those turnover rates were based on 2018, 2019 data. And even though we don't have a full year to look at for the following year, they are currently trending higher, unfortunately, in some of those categories. So we believe that those adjustments are going to be needed to have that competitive, not even advantage, but to be able to competitively compete with other industries surrounding us here in Mecklenburg County. Again, the impact of that attrition is high because in some of those positions as well, we see the most numbers of positions. So for example, with pre-K and K3 assistants, we have approximately 841 positions across the district. So when you're looking at a turnover rate of 30%, that's a lot of people. With custodians, we have 588. ASAP assistants, 156. Lunchroom assistants, 116. And I said 841 for the pre-K, K3 assistants. So again, that just demonstrates the high number of people that we're talking about that we could potentially impact by making adjustments to these rates. In terms of what market represents, that is really the 50th percentile or the median of the market survey data that was done initially in 2018. However, we don't have to worry about that data being too dated because we did refresh those rates in January of 2019. So those are the most recent rates that we've looked at. And with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, the superintendent and Ms. Craven Howell.
Mr. Superintendent, unmute.
I knew it was coming. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to start us off with this particular question, which centered around our magnet programs. And the specific question is, I would like to better understand the benefits our students, every subgroup, are reaping from our partial magnet program. This is a costly program with a number of schools. We are currently running partial magnet programs. And I have long talked about whether this investment is reaping the benefits originally defined for these programs, or whether this investment is better spent doubling down on our programs in full magnets and neighborhood schools. And so let me just first provide just a little bit of context or background about our magnet programs. I don't want to assume that the public, general public knows all there is to know about magnets. So We have a total of 73 magnet programs. So we have about 29 full magnets, and then we have 44 magnets with attendance areas. And when you take both of those into account, we have over 43,000 students enrolled in a full or a magnet with an attendance area. I do want to spend a moment talking about, because I do believe that there are benefits to our magnet schools with attendance areas. And I'm saying attendance areas, but some people may refer to them as partial magnets. One of the benefits of our partial magnets is the increased access that it provides to families to a wide range of magnet programs. Without the partial magnet programs, the district's magnet offerings would be cut by more than half, which would impact both students who apply through the lottery and students from the homeschool attendance area. Another benefit to our partial magnet programs is that it allows the district to fill available seats in schools that have availability without having to come to the board and change school boundaries. Another benefit is that I believe that it can contribute to the socioeconomic diversity in schools, which might otherwise lack SES diversity. And then also a benefit is that in all of our magnet programs, the intent is to integrate the theme across the curriculum at the school as an enhancement, but not to replace it or replace the core curriculum. So that's just a little bit of background about our magnets and our full magnets and our partial magnets. There was another question that I'll read that says that with this being the first budget cycle under your leadership, I'd like to understand the key resources and investment priorities that you may be recommending since last year's budget cycle. How are we reprioritizing resources and investments in order to maximize the performance of our strategic priorities and metrics? The strategic plan called for investments to close the gap for all subgroups, the gap between current performance metrics and 100%. How do we identify savings from cost cutting, avoidance, and show transfer, reprogramming of funds to best move the strategic plan dials? I'd like to see this prioritize spend in alignment to drive closure of the gap for all subgroups as well as the other strategic priorities. And so I'm going to start off, but I'm going to invite our Chief Academic Officer, Brian Kingsley, to chime in as well. So as we went through this budget cycle, which is a reminder, we began in November. But as we went through this budget cycle, one of the key areas that we knew we needed to make a significant investment in was our curriculum. You all may recall that last year, we did not get the $4 million in funding for the current year, in order to expand, to the point that was made in the question, we needed to redirect some funds toward our strategic priorities, which I'm happy to say or reiterate, which is our instructional core. And we believe that is the most important thing we can do to help move the dial and to reduce some of the disparities that we see in our district today. I will invite Brian to speak more to some of the actual specific redirections that we actually made in the budget because there were several. So Mr. Kingsley, not trying to give you a new last name, Mr. Kingsley, I will hand it over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everybody remotely. I hope everybody's safe. Under Superintendent Winston's leadership, our cabinet analyzed all aspects of our budget with the lens focused on quality, alignment, and efficiency. That was critically important to drive efficiencies to scale our big strategies and key district priorities. This process was multifaceted, as our superintendent alluded to, and it helped ensure that all of our dollars were prioritized against those academic goals. More specifically, what we were able to do this year is we took a unique financing strategy with our federal dollars by braiding them, integrating our federal dollars, our Title I, Title II, and Title IV dollars to expand our high quality curriculum investment across the district while investing in more professional learning opportunities for our teachers and school-based instructional supports for our middle schools, which we recognize was a key area that did not have significant instructional facilitators and supports. The impact of that financing strategy, which our district took on for the first time in quite a while, was that there was a zero reduction in the PPA for our Title I schools. I just need to be clear about that. We did not take money away from schools, but we were able to redirect $5.9 million in federal dollars to expand our curriculum services, professional learning opportunities, and increase the supports that are available at our middle schools. Another aspect of our strategy and prioritization was that we were really intentional about strategically sunsetting various curriculum investments that simply just no longer serve our district, our teachers, and our community well. We gleaned that information by listening to our teachers through school surveys and our school leaders, analyzing our district contracts next to data for how often they are being used and how deeply they're being used across the district, and other quality assurance standards such as state standards, grade appropriateness, professional development, and cost. We redirected other investments that we recognized based upon end user feedback and that were not always necessarily fitting and or primarily aligned to our district goals, that totaled a redirection equating to $4.9 million, which I think is something we should be incredibly proud of. In addition to that redirection, we also realigned existing staff in some instances and reanalyzed and reimagined some key job descriptions to implement a new comprehensive service delivery model for our learning communities that ensures that our teachers and our school-based leaders have more instructional supports available to them across all of our learning communities. The impact of that is an increase in 14 new curriculum specialists. It's 5 new positions and a redirection of 9 others. So I think that's important, and those staff members will be fully aligned to our learning communities in the fall. And lastly, another key strategy is that we have rolled out at a high level to our school leaders, and it's still continuing to develop substance and legs. But we have a new district-wide professional development calendar that we are still working on for the 2020-2021 school year that reduces significantly our dependencies as a district on the use of external partners to provision PD, as well as the need for substitute teachers, freeing up other dollars to expand new curriculum implementation and other professional learning development opportunities for our teachers and our direct supports to schools. The impact of this is that our teachers and school-based leaders across the district will be able to receive up to 8 days of professional learning direct to our from our district that's purely aligned to our district priorities in the year ahead, which simply was not possible based upon our existing calendar. So that these multifaceted approaches are key areas that align to our priorities, but they were the reutilization and the redirection of existing funds. Superintendent Winston, I believe I get a chance and the honor to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I unmuted myself without being told to do so. So
getting better and better at this.
Thank you. So I have the next question, which is the requirement to report per pupil spending by school was deferred from December 31st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. Although I understand the state shared their figures with us last year. These figures may serve as useful reference for our budget review discussions and certainly need to be shared with the board for a discussion of the key findings, messages, and communications plan prior to public release. So the state, as was acknowledged as part of the question, the state will ultimately publish the per pupil report to comply with the with ESSA or the Every Student Succeeds Act requirements. We received, so CMS received a final draft of this report in January, but we have not completed our analysis of that at this time. We do anticipate that when that analysis is complete, as we've done in the past with similar per pupil reports, when they were produced, we can review with the board and certainly provide a few school comparisons and how a variety of factors can impact the raw per pupil expenditure amount. There was a question, and I'm going to transition to the next question. There was a question about could we provide a stipend for our classroom-based staff who have had to acquire additional assets to work from home? And I know this was a question that came up earlier during our board meeting as we were talking about another agenda item. And so I would say that this is something that we can certainly look at going forward, particularly if this situation continues to extend much longer beyond May the 15th. You know, one of the things I think we would have to do is to identify a funding source for this, and we would actually need to determine how to gather this information. What my guidance would be for the time being is that if there is any teacher who believes that he or she has some significant needs as they work remotely, I would encourage them to certainly raise that with their principal so that they can try to address those needs. There was, and I think this might be the last question, but there was a question about school security officers. And specifically the question reads, during the last budget cycle, there was a staff request, superintendent recommendation to start to fund SROs in our elementary schools. And this was backed by data that supported the recommendation. Ultimately, the board chose to shift this funding request to additional social and emotional and behavioral support staff in our schools. I'd like to revisit the data supporting this recommendation, whether brought forward as a superintendent recommendation or ultimately not. I would also like to make sure that we understand the number of SROs that we fund in our elementary schools versus the number of social and emotional behavior staff. So I am happy to share that data again about why there could be value in providing some school resource officers in our elementary schools. I will say that currently there are no school resource officers assigned specifically to elementary schools. We do have roughly 304 social and emotional support positions in our elementary schools, and specifically those are our school counselors, social workers, and our psychologists. I would also like to add that our police department here in CMS, we do partner with other law enforcement agencies to provide requested services to our elementary schools. So CMS PD presently has about 4 police officers to patrol all of the CMS elementary schools, and these officers respond to calls for service at the elementary schools. When CMS PD is not, when our officers are not available or close to a school needing assistance, then our partners with CMS PD will dispatch a police officer from an law enforcement agency In terms of value that SROs bring, they are proven to be problem solvers, mentors to students, service educators, resources and support systems, and safety experts. Above all else, our SROs assigned to schools, they actually receive special training, training specifically for the duties in an educational setting. So the emphasis is on establishing trusting and engaging positive relationships with elementary school students that will translate, we hope, into positive attitudes toward SROs and police officers in general as our students matriculate into adulthood. And so that was the last question that we had, Chair and board members. I don't know if it would be appropriate if anyone had any follow-up questions or comments about the information that staff provided, or if it would be to your pleasure to call for any additional questions.
So that was very thorough. I think that was an efficient way to handle things, given that we're dealing with, unpredictable technology. So thank you, Mr. Winston and staff. Let's not spend too much time, but I will do a quick round and see if we have more questions. Ms. Myers-Bailey?
Yes, I had a couple of questions, one for Brian Kingsley and one for Kathy Elling. I go Brian first. You mentioned that we were doing a lot of our professional development much more efficiently now than we had been in past years, and that was a cost savings to us. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm speaking in reference to our plans for 2020, 2021.
Right. And I was wondering, is the fact that we are doing more of our professional development here in CMS, is that also of a benefit to our teachers who are trying to either preserve their license or accreditation or whatever, so that they don't have to go externally and pay for courses to qualify for those licenses?
Absolutely. We've been hearing, actually, even through our remote learning plan, we've been getting a lot of positive feedback around helping our teachers move forward with their credits that they need for certification, especially around digital learning competencies. And so continuing to deepen these types of infrastructures will only add value to our existing teachers, as well as provide them local friendly faces and supports in terms of who is facilitating. So as Dr. Hayes would say, that we're building a bench in terms of teacher leadership across the district, and which also enables us to provide smaller groups of learning. So not necessarily having hundreds or thousands of teachers, but provisioning professional learning through the learning communities, I think is going to be a huge win for our district in the year ahead.
And that we will in the end up with more qualified, better qualified teacher workforce. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. One of our key priorities is having great access to great teachers. And that is our intention through this plan, to build that.
Okay, thank you.
You're
My
very welcome.
other question for Kathy Elling is regarding what I heard her say about funding was not the, it sounded like whether they needed a lot of services or a few services, they were getting the same dollar amount to pay for those services. Did I hear that correctly?
Let me respond. Can you hear me, first of all? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to respond to your question, and part of it, I had a little trouble hearing you, but essentially the exceptional children's funding is, you're absolutely correct. We get funded on an individual child count basis for exceptional children's services, and the additional services a child needs, whether it could be a lot or a little, are not a part of that calculation. So you are correct.
Yeah, and I'm concerned because we could have one child that needs you know, is a high performing, needs just a couple of things, and then we have a other child here that needs massive amounts, but we can't distinguish and meet each child's needs appropriately financially. That concerns me.
I appreciate your lifting that question, and I appreciate your concern around that. I agree.
Oh, but what I'm hearing also is there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, I guess I would answer that in terms of we're not, to my knowledge, allowed to change how the funding for exceptional children's programming arrives to us. So I appreciate you lifting up the concern around how do we ensure, I think this is a concern, how do we ensure that students who need whatever they need based on their individual education plan get that high quality level of service. And I will be glad to think through with our exceptional children's team how we're currently making that work, and we can provide additional information.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
You're welcome.
Okay, I see Ms. Ship.
Yes, I had a question too. I think this would be for Brian Kingsley. You mentioned, and I think Ms. Boswell, about professional development. My concern is always making sure everybody has the professional development they need and the timeliness of scheduling it, because many teachers are concerned about getting the professional development when they need it. An example would be the new reading program that came out this school year, and there was still a lot of needs for that reading program. So as we look at this, and I know you're doing a great job, because teachers are really happy with the professional development they're getting. I want to thank you for that, and that they're going to receive their CEUs, and I worked in professional development, so that's wonderful. But I do want to take a look at how we schedule professional development and how this create needs for substitutes. If we're doing this during the school day and we're losing time out of the classroom, sometimes that's a concern when teachers are in professional development. And I know they have half days now, but again, when we talk about the great need for professional development, when we're changing curriculum, like we're looking at reading again, the reading program again going forward, how do we ensure that we're going to make sure we can do what's necessary to schedule professional development that does not create a loss of instruction in the classroom?
I agree. We heard from teachers loud and clear that they want more professional learning, and they don't want to do it at the expense of the students that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so the team has worked incredibly hard with multiple stakeholders to develop a plan to better leverage the use of teacher planning days in the future, while also making sure that we are cognizant of the role that many of those days plan for teachers and for schools and school improvement planning. But we feel really comfortable that we have struck a balance that we can provision up to 8 days. I say up to, it's not a directive, but we know that teachers need deep supports. We've heard from our reading planners, or our new English language arts curriculum, especially in the areas of kindergarten through 3rd grade and the development of key foundational skills. So we really want to make sure that we're responsive of that while not taking children or teachers out of their classroom, so we can ensure that they are best serving their students. We know that's where they want to be.
Right, thank you. Because the reading is so important. As I look at our goals, our number one goal, to make sure every student graduates with meaningful employment and higher education opportunities, we want to make sure that academic achievement is the forefront of this budget. Everything that we're doing at the end of the day will ensure that our children and our students come out on top, because that's what it's going to take for them to be employed and or go into career or college readiness. So in what you're doing is great, and I hope that continues, and that our budget fully supports these efforts as we look at the number of teachers we're employing. I don't know, this probably is not your question about recruitment and retention. Where are we now with that in terms of our budget too? And I know that goes with salaries as well. I think that is Christine Pajot question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to follow up to Mr. Kingsley's comments and to address that question, we are on track with recruitment for the upcoming school year. Of course, that looks and feels much different because for example, our on-site recruitment events have all been canceled due to the COVID-19 situation. However, in place of those in-person events, we are doing virtual job fairs, not only participating in them, but also planning on hosting some as well. So that process is underway. Our HR team is working closely with their partners in all of the schools and the principals to come up with those adequate staffing plans. Those were already complete as of last week. We have already processed close to 100 teachers who are also returning. These are teachers who may have been hired towards the end of the school year last year or after the start of the first day, I should say. So we are hiring those teachers back. So far, so good. We are on track, but we are going to have to be innovative and creative with the way in which we reach out to these teachers in particular. Also, I wanted to mention that our CMS teaching residency program is positioned very strongly going into this school year. We are in the process of going through approximately 200 people that are enrolling, which is phenomenal at this juncture. We have an additional 20 applications under review. So that's going to be a very rich source for us to be able to find and hire top talent for our kids.
Thank you so much for that. And one last question. I think this is for Superintendent Ernest Winston. Dealing with our SROs, I wanted to know what was the decision? I know that question came up in the past about those in the elementary schools. Because there is a need for them. And I know you weighed that out against the social workers and psychologists and counselors, but you know that there's not full-time staffing for those positions in the elementary schools necessarily. So does that balance out in terms of some of the support that's needed?
Thank you, Ms. Shipp. Thank you for circling back around to that question. And what I would say is that by far the most, there's nothing more important than our students and their safety. And so by providing, or assigning SROs to the elementary schools, that would demonstrate the value that we honor to provide a safe learning environment for all of our students and our staff. I firmly believe that all students and staff members, in order to achieve the goals that we have and for all of our students to reach their full potential, they absolutely must feel safe and secure when they're at school. So what I would say is that, should the board determine that this request is a priority for 2020-21 school year, there are some considerations that we'll probably want to give. I know that based on the cost projections and potential staffing of hiring a school resource officer for every elementary school, it would be recommended, or would be staff's recommendation, that we initiate the hiring and placement of school resource officers. I would say probably at a maximum of about 25 SROs per year. So not to try to do it all in one school year. And then, would further recommend that the initial 25 SROs be assigned to groups of elementary schools to provide a police presence. So that's what I would share. That would be my best thinking at this point regarding SROs in elementary schools, Ms. Shipp.
Thank you so much, because it is needed for our kids to be safe with so much going on today. Thank you.
Great. Did I see your hand, Ms. Delahara? You're unmuted.
Yes, thank you so much. Just two questions, and the first one may be really quick. I just want to clarify, and I honestly don't remember who said this, but someone at some point mentioned that we did not get the 4 million that we were, I guess, counting on in funding to expand our curriculum. I just want to clarify, since I wasn't here last year, was that because of a lack of a past budget by the state? Like, where did that 4 million come from? I'm just unclear, like when someone says that.
So Ms. De La Hara, yes, ma'am. So
Sheila was speaking, but she needs to.
I was talking, but just couldn't.
So
Ernest,
Sheila,
you want me to take that?
You can take that. I think we're both prepared, but yes, I will defer to you.
I was just going to remind folks that was a part of our budget ask for this year from the county, but our full budget request was not funded.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood that correctly. And then secondly, I just want to mention, I'm so glad that Ms. Stamper brought up the concern about our English language learner students and why that may have dropped down with regards to poverty or free and reduced lunch. And I'm glad on 2 points, I guess a comment, and then I'll follow up with a question that, of course, not all of our international families that move here are, in a poverty situation. So that's great that we are acknowledging that. And then secondly, I really think she hit a great point, because we're seeing that across the community, in the immigrant communities where folks have traditionally needed some services and are now choosing not to fill out for particular services. And although the National School Lunch Program has traditionally always been excluded from concerns related to what's commonly known now as public charge, there are concerns in the community that could change at any moment, given some of the changes that are happening on the immigration front with this administration. So I really appreciate that being brought up, and it led me to think of the question, and maybe we don't have this prepared for tonight and someone can follow up with me later, but I wonder if we've considered as a district taking that into consideration, how we might be in a position to help families that maybe would have applied. And I certainly would want to be sensitive and not delve into their personal information. But for example, if there was a family that had applied in a previous year that maybe is not now, is there in an operational level any touch points that we've pushed out at the school level to just check in on particular families who might really have a need and not applying for it for whatever reason?
Yes, ma'am. I think I know that our school nutrition team works very, very closely with each of the schools. And they do check in on like a trend. If it has changed over the past year or so, then they will definitely check in. And the staff at the school, they know those families so well, and they will just reach out to them. Again, as you said, not trying to get into their personal business, right, but we do indeed have a wonderful partnership with the schools, with the child nutrition team and those specific families. And we want to make sure that they know when the proper time is to apply and how to do that. And so there's many, many attempts to do that to make sure that everybody just takes that opportunity if they wish.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm very grateful to hear that. And I may follow up at a later point just to touch base and get more info on that. But that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we get a fresh set of eyes on this budget and, the student perspective. So before I go to Mr. Schul, do we have any other board member questions? Ms. Marshall, can you give us a quick question?
Yeah, I think the several themes here, but I think what we've all got to remember is we know that I think Superintendent Winston alluded to this before, that our funding from the county could be flat. So I think we're going to have to really think hard on what we try to advance here because they're all important. Some things that have sort of jumped out to me as this discussion has gone on is that we our funding for our students with disabilities is tough, and we have more, and we have some state mandates that I'm not sure are funded, and how we need to lift this up. And I think to our legislative partners to say, let's look harder at that funding, are we meeting the needs of these children? And my guess is, in a funding scenario, no is the answer. So we need to look at this harder with them. And certainly, I think our English language learners, we've had such a drastic increase. We need to make sure that we've got the folks in place to address that head count. So I'm hopeful, Ms. Shirley, that we get that money, some additional monies there. I'm gonna be looking at that and crossing fingers too. And then certainly COVID-19 impacts in terms of hygiene. This is, again, it's a new normal, so we're going to have to adjust to that, and there will be dollars that point into that. One quick thing I did want to ask, as we were talking particularly about our special populations children, I remember hearing that with the Met County expansion of pre-K, which I think is fabulous. I'm so excited about that, but we have identified at least 70 children that we think we're going to have occupational therapy screenings and things for. So it sounds like that's the kind of thing that is mandated by the state. Are there funds for those screenings that we can tap into, or is that just you have to handle this kind of thing again? And I think that would be for Kathy Elling. She might not be there.
I'm
Well,
here.
if not,
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Marshall. I think I want to clarify that occupational therapy screenings are required for any student for whom we are considering a diagnosis of autism, regardless of whether or not they're pre-K or in our kindergarten through 12th grade span. We don't know yet the level of need of the 70 students and the particular related services they're going to need. So I would rather not come across with like an off-the-cuff answer. I would be glad to research that and provide more information.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we definitely need to get Gabe's perspective and questions on this. So you're up, Mr. Schul.
Thank you. I had a couple questions for Mr. Kingsley. So we talked about sunsetting some type of curriculum. I was wondering if we can get some more clarity on like what curriculum is being sunsetted, if it's only being sunsetted or just eliminated.
So Gabe, it's a great question. We're not in a position to announce the specific curricula at this time because we're still having those conversations with the providers and our schools. And so I wouldn't want that messaging to be first read in the newspaper tomorrow morning. So, but we anticipate those conversations happening very soon and they're ongoing, but I'm not able to give you that information tonight. I'm really sorry about that.
Okay. Could you maybe talk about like what kind of stipulations, or like you said, there was like some teacher response or feedback, how that's working, how we're getting teacher feedback?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. So we've done teacher surveys, we've done principal surveys, we've looked at the utilization of the various curricula in terms of the footprint that it's basically taking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis across the district. In many cases, the contracts that I was referencing are district-wide contracts. And so just as an example, we may be purchasing something for 100% of our schools and have less than 10% of our schools actually using it. And so when we recognize that, not just from a financial aspect, but we got to make sure that we're also asking, is it the right resource? Why is that? Like what is missing? And those surveys were really helpful in being able to kind of flesh out the realities of what our schools have been experiencing. And I think also too, we've had to recognize that many of our curricula that's been in place has been in place for quite a long time in some instances. And we obviously have a very significant new investment in curriculum, but our standards keep changing. And I don't say that as an indictment upon our state. I say that, our standards across our country have changed within the last decade. Our standard course of study in certain instances, as you're aware, as a high school student have changed even in your 4 years as a high school student. So really making sure that what we have is most up to date, most recent. And there's also a lot of competition in the open educational resource market that, there are a lot of things that are available that are high quality, that are free. And I think many of our teachers and students are experiencing that right now for the first time as we've all kind of moved into a remote learning environment. Free doesn't mean good. And so we need to do a really great job of communicating and working with our schools and students and teachers on identifying quality, but you know, it's quality, it's cost, it's utilization, it's tech integration, it's all of those things together that drive our decisions at a cabinet.
That's why I was asking, because I think it's really important that we get enough value on some of the curriculum investments, especially in the past. So then also, is there any effort to use like student feedback for those same curriculum?
That's a fair question. We have used student feedback to drive the selection of new curriculum. I would say in hindsight, you know, just speaking, you know, thinking right now, I don't know how deep our student perspective is of the things that we're considering sunsetting. So I want to name that. I think that we could think about doing something a little bit differently in the future about that. But, you know, we're hopeful right now that our teacher perspective is reflective of the students that they serve. We believe that it is. But I do think going an extra step to engage students differently around curriculum could be something a meaningful step moving forward.
I think some students would really appreciate that sort of initiative. I also had a couple questions for Mr. Rue. So you were talking about how in a few weeks we're going to be clearer on like device accessibility and the need for where Chromebooks might be distributed. Maybe you could just clarify for the public what's going on right now to make sure that we're meeting people's needs in respect to accessibility for Chromebooks.
Yeah, sure. And it's been in deep partnership with our schools and our learning community superintendents. We have been actively surveying and reaching out into the community. Let me step back. In the first wave of this, it was, hey, please come get your device, you know, and they were trying to get people to come and get their devices. And we handed out a lot of devices through that process. The second wave of that was sort of reaching out after the initial shock of being closing all of our schools so suddenly was over, and we did a second reach out for come get your device, and we had a lot of drive-through pickup and that sort of thing. Then we actively began to survey our community on, you know, what are your needs? And we're calling people, the individual teachers are contacting their students individually, and we're collecting a lot of data around that. Our initial data collection was around the Chromebook and the device, and do you have access to that? Do you need access to that? Our second now round of that reach out is around, okay, now that we've sort of stabilized on the devices, do you have good, solid, stable internet access at home? We're doing a couple of things. We're, again, our grassroots effort to survey our community. We are, of course, handing out hotspots, so we'll know as we get through the 6,000 that we have slated to go out here, and we've already done several thousand, but the 6,000 total that we have slated to go out during this crisis, you know, if it turns out that we end up with a slight inventory at the end, then we'll know about what the number is. But if the demand continues to grow, then we'll start to know exactly how many are needed. So we're doing everything in our power to do it. Our community partners have been fantastic. Our schools have been fantastic. Our teachers and principals have all really come together to help us collect this data and compile it into usable information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'm all good.
All right. Well, before we wrap up this workshop, I just want to point out that we are on schedule to vote on the budget request in April 28th, which is coming up very quickly. And given the revised economic forecast from the county, as well as what we're hearing from the state, I think we might have some real prioritizing that we're going to have to do, and a lot of work between now and April 28th. We have a lot of work. Some of our folks are going to be on spring break at home next week, but I think we're all going to be working pretty hard to make some tough choices around this budget. I did want to ask you, Ms. Shirley, you know, I know every year we kind of point out there are certain expenses that grow for CMS that we have no choice but to spend money on. So when our budget request grows, there are certain parts of that budget request that we have no choice whatsoever. These are mandates, things that we have to spend money on. And then there are other parts of the budget which are very, very important to invest in, but they're not required. So could you break that up into two buckets for us?
Sure.
So if you just think back, you can either turn to the page in the book, or you can just think back about the local request and the components, and it's organized into sustaining operations, investing in our people, growth and new space, and then of course new initiatives. So if you think about the items under sustaining operations, we had the local supplement for the House Bill 90 positions, which we know we are going to get. I mean, barring some really extraordinary change in what the state funding has approved already, we will get about 90 additional teacher positions, and we will need to provide that local supplement for that. So that would be included. I would probably make the argument that while I guess it's discretionary, the 1.3 million that we need for the project modernization, I think it would cost us significantly more than that if we had to take a significant pause in that. So I would include that as required as well. So that total is about $2 million. And then if you look at investing our employee section, it's pretty clear that the health and the retirement rates are going to increase, given the fact that those have been approved even as a part of this year's micro budgets. And those amounts that we've used are predicted in that approval. And then the salary increases, assuming that those occur, again, in alignment with what was approved in the conference budget over the summer, that would add to those amounts. So that's right about $9 million. And then the growth that we're projecting, most significantly in charter schools, that's not an option. We have to provide that pass-through funding, and that's about $9 million. And then additionally, when we open a new school, we have to provide the staffing that's necessary to absolutely staff that school, and also the custodians, et cetera, to clean the school and the facility requirements in order to maintain that square footage. So that's another $2 million. And then, so if you add all those together, those things I just mentioned, that comes to a total of about 22.8 million. And that represents about 62% or so of our request, which basically would leave about 14.1 million that we would consider perhaps not absolutely required. And the two main areas would be the 1411, moving to the 1411, which we've all talked about how important and how difficult some of the positions that we are having with turnover. And so while it's not required, it's certainly definitely important. And our limited number of expansion and new initiative items for this year, those total 11 million. So the sum of those two things would be what I would say are sort of absolutely important, but not required.
So just to reiterate that, if we only did what we absolutely are required to do, no choice whatsoever, our budget request would grow by $22.8 million. And so if we have to look at flat funding, that means we're going to have to cut or redirect $22.8 million and not even consider all these incredibly important things that are multi-year initiatives that we've been building upon, like increasing the numbers of psychologists and social workers and counselors to get closer to the average, that the recommended average that we know our children need, the curriculum advancements, and getting our hardworking staff even a little bit closer to a living wage, but still not quite at a living wage. I just want to level set that about the work that we have to do in front of us. All right, well, and with that, we will get ready for further work on another day, and then we will move on to the reports section of our board meeting. First, we have a report on budget amendments for February of 2020. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
As presented, Madam Chair.
Okay, next we have a report on financial statements for February 2020. I turn to Mr. Superintendent for this report.
As presented.
And finally, we have a report on capital project ordinances for February 2020. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
As presented, Madam Chair.
All right, and now do you have any other reports for us, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have one additional report, and this one is not as presented. So last week Friday, I was pleased to join the president of Queens University, President Lugo, and members of his team in announcing a new partnership between the district and Queens University of Charlotte in what's called the Queens Commitment Program. This program will provide financial relief for students and families and will help our students earn a bachelor's degree. CMS graduates who have been admitted to Queens will receive a $10,000 annual scholarship, so up to $40,000 over the life of the student's career at Queens. In addition to that, Queens also announced last Friday that our seniors would not have to pay an application fee or submit any standardized test scores, and they will receive credit for remote learning courses. I wanted to share this because this is an example of a wonderful partnership that will give a tremendous opportunity for our students. I want to spend the rest of my time in the report providing a COVID-19 update. And first, I'd like to address remote learning. So a new learning for our students began this week district-wide. Of course, students in grades 4 through 12, they're using their devices, and our pre-K through third graders are using printed packets that we're providing for them at our meal distribution sites. But I do want to say that I certainly understand that there are some circumstances that may deter or limit a student's or a family's ability to actually be engaged. And so if a student is unable to complete new learning opportunities due to limited access to a computer or they don't have connectivity, I would sincerely ask our families to please contact their child's teacher so that we can assist with providing either or both of that those resources. Also want to remind our families that there will be no instruction being provided during the teacher workday on tomorrow, April the 9th, and then also on Friday, which is a holiday, and also during next week's spring break. I do want to share a specific message to our families because I know that with this new approach to remote learning that we're all getting adjusted to, I am asking for your continued partnership in keeping your students, our students, engaged during the statewide school closure. While our school buildings may not, well, actually, while they are closed, remote learning must continue for all of our students. Our teachers and our staff have high expectations for all of our students to remain engaged with remote learning opportunities. And I know families have those same expectations. So I would ask families to continue to partner with us in keeping all of our students focused and on task throughout the remainder of the school closure. Next, I'd like to just touch on the topic of grading, because I know that's a hot topic. I know that board members and staff members are receiving questions about grading. So you all may recall that the State Board of Education and the Department of Public Instruction's guidance around grading, which I believe has been very helpful. I believe that additional state guidance to actually ensure the consistency in each school district across the state on expectations of grading during this remote learning period will actually go even further to give our families the clarity that they're asking us for. So it's our position that student assignments issued during this remote learning period should not harm students' grades as of March 13th. And while we know that both the State Board of Education and actually the UNC system have and will continue to act on the best interest of our students. We think that the sooner we can assure our students and our families that they won't be unfairly impacted by this virus, the better. We know also that one of the key criteria that must be considered when looking at moving forward with new learning and grading is the ability to provide access to all students. And we shared some information, and I know that Gabe asked a great question earlier about students who currently don't have access to that. And so we need to be able, if we move forward, we need to be able to do so with the assurance that all students have access. And so as a result, right now we're providing informal grades with feedback on assignments to students. I want to shift for a moment to CMS TV3. We're actually launching some additional supplemental resources on CMS TV3. One of those is Read With Me, which is a program focusing on our younger learners. We've also brought back, many of you may recall, Math Extra, which is an interactive show that provides curriculum aligned with math instruction for our middle school students. These programs will air on CMS TV, on our social media platforms, and they'll also be able to be downloaded from our CMS website. I want to spend a moment as I transition to meal distribution. I am so happy that our district continues to meet the needs of our students who depend on the school community to provide them with nutritious meals. Since the program, the meal distribution program began March 17th, we have served more than 400,000 grab-and-go breakfasts and lunches. And I believe today alone, we served more than 37,000 meals. So kudos to our entire team. And as I close, I'd like to really thank staff for all of the work that they're doing to make this transition as smooth as possible. We've not gotten everything right, but that hasn't stopped us from trying. And I'm extremely grateful to our team, our entire team, for everything that they've done and sacrificed during this time. I am hopeful now that everyone will be able to take advantage of spring break next week and spend some time virtually connecting with friends and family. And I also hope that people will get a chance to fill their cup and take a much needed break. And I wish everyone a week of safety above all else. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Okay, at this time, I will recognize any board member who wishes to make a report. Ms. Sawyer, and then I see Ms. Marshall next.
Good evening. Ms. Marshall and I have been asking community for help in constructing face masks for our staff who work at meal distribution sites and other staff who work in contact with the public or in close proximity. We estimate that we need 1,000 washable face masks to meet the needs so that each of our approximately 500 staff members and volunteers would have 2 masks, one to be in wash and one to wear. And I think we're probably coming up to 200 to 300 that we have probably in the hopper now that folks have already made. And I just want to encourage people to keep sewing. We've got a lot of folks who are working in the community, and we need you to keep going. So if you have masks, you can email me or any other board member, and we can send you the distribution points or where you can drop them off for us. I'd also like to quickly remind folks that the census is due. North Carolina is lagging in our reports, in our completion rates of the census. And the census is incredibly important for our federal funding for schools and lots of other resources in our community. So you can complete the census online, and I urge everyone to do that. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to the EL department. I had a teacher today telling me what an amazing job the EL staff, the English language learners staff, had done in providing professional development and support over these last few weeks. And she was astounded at the quality and was just blown over by the incredible work of that team. So just a shout out to them. So get sewing.
So I see Ms. Marshall, and then after you, I see Ms. Byers-Bailey, and then Ms. De La Hara.
Hey, thanks for letting me speak. I want to raise up just a few groups that I think have just done exceptional work. And I know when you name people, then you forget people, but that's okay, because I have a feeling I'm going to hear about some more. So I'll tell you about them the next time. But I want to specifically highlight three groups that I think have just gone really above and beyond in our school community. AG Middle School, right when school ended, they knew that they were going to have a lot of needs in their school community. So they set a pretty ambitious goal, of a monetary goal for families to contribute to help with food needs and other things. And it was a mighty goal. Well, they exceeded it by 5 times. So what has happened now is the principal has been able to, reach out to families and be able to meet some needs for our students. And I'm just really thrilled, and I appreciate all the families at AG Middle that have contributed to that. And then Sister School Myers Park has done the same sort of thing, and as meeting some needs that are really maybe not all food related, but just some really important needs that our families are experiencing there. And I'm just going to let those sort of keep private, but I just think that it's a beautiful thing when our school community understands each other and supports each other. And then a special shout out to South Meck High School. They have coordinated a very sustained and organized effort to distribute food to hundreds of people. And it's not just a one and done. They have just stood up an incredible way to partner with our CMS Grab and Go at Quail Hollow Middle. And just some great needs are being met. And I'm just really thankful for those community members and the staff at all those schools in the South Meck area that are participating in that. I want to say one thing that sort of dovetails into the grading piece. I know I'm hearing a lot of comments on that. And I think, again, it's just one of those things that we're all having to deal with because it doesn't look like what we thought it always looked like. Our measurement system for everything has been upended. But I want to sort of recast this just a little bit. Oftentimes I hear people say this, and I've said this myself with my own children, that my children are not just one letter grade. They're not just one data point. And this is an opportunity for folks to sort of tell their story. We hear the word anecdotal evidence or informal evidence that's captured on Canvas. And I just want to encourage families and students to really be in conversation with your teachers. This is an opportunity to develop some skills, to learn how to communicate online to teachers and colleagues that you're going to need for the rest of your life. So this is a great way to start that. But I think it's a great way to paint a picture for high school students, particularly for teachers that may be able to really give an incredible reference going forward for college, or reference for a career opportunity, because they really see how you respond in a time of struggle. And I think that's just real important. So it's not just about that one letter grade. And I know it's that, there are folks that are really dependent on that and really see that in their future right now, because it's just very front of mind. But I want to just encourage people to look at this as a way to really develop the whole child and talk about the whole child and communicate that to our staff. So thanks, families, for hanging in there with us. We're just getting more information, and we'll give that to you. It's hopefully it'll get clearer every day. And most of all, thanks to our staff for doing incredible work. And I'm so glad they get a little bit of a break next week.
All right, Ms. Byers-Bailey.
Thank you. We are bragging about our schools in the wonderful way they have stepped up. And so I'm lifting up, I have two things, but right now, first I want to talk about what Northwest School of the Arts has been doing to contribute. They have their media specialists and theater arts teachers formulated a plan to use the school's 3D printers to create face masks. And they went around and they found all of the materials through the supplies, and they went and they developed these face masks, and they are distributing them to our medical supply people who are not, we all have heard repeatedly how they don't get enough. And as I was congratulating my Northwest faculty on what their students were doing, I got another email saying, well, that's not the only thing our kids did. They also created some, let's see, where let me find it. The apparel classes made hospital masks at home and donated those to the local doctors and nurses. So, you know, our students and our faculty are really stepping up. And I think they deserve our kudos. The other thing I would like to bring to the attention is something that occurred over the weekend. At the last part of last week, I discovered that there had been some monies distributed to all of the districts in North Carolina, and half of it had been distributed the way it's always distributed, and the other half was distributed in a new and different method that I found appalling. And so I wrote an opinion piece, and I called it Leadership Matters, and I'd like to share it with you and with the public. As the District 2 representative on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, I was the first person to raise the issue of the delay of the reopening of the Lincoln Heights Academy, which was on the 2017 bond projected to the CM bond project to the CMS administration. I then brought the issue to the attention of District 2 community in a town hall meeting in the media center of the Lincoln Heights Academy. As vice chair of the CMS board, I was the first to raise the issue of lack of grab-and-go food sites available to the children living on the Beatties Ford Road corridor to the CMS administration. And I then brought this issue to the attention of the District 2 community in a virtual meeting of the Council of Elders. As the recently elected District 6 representative on the North Carolina School Boards Association Board of Directors, I find the need to raise my voice again when I see an inequity unaddressed. The North Carolina School Boards Association, NCSBA, is divided into districts, and each district has a seat on their board of directors. CMS is one of several schools in District 6, which I represent. Our State Department of Public Instruction, DPI, made a decision this week to which I have serious objections regarding the way large sums of monies are being distributed to the North Carolina school districts. It's my understanding that when DPI receives the sums of money to be distributed among North Carolina districts, there is a method that has been used for years to determine which districts get their share as follows. Half of the amount is distributed proportionally according to the percentage of low-income students in their respective districts, and CMS and other wealth districts receive a portion of this amount. The other half is normally distributed proportionately to only the low wealth districts. Normally CMS and other wealthier counties do not normally receive anything from this distribution. It's my understanding that this week, DPI received a $50 million fund to distribute to the school districts in North Carolina to help us all bear the expenses that we've incurred because of the coronavirus. However, a decision was made to do something different with the funds as follows. Half of the amount was distributed proportionately according to the percentage of low-income students in their respective districts. CMS and other wealthier districts received their proportion of this amount just as before. The distribution of the other half is not following the normal process that has been used for years. This time, every North Carolina school district except CMS will receive monies from this fund distribution. Some would have me step away from this issue because CMS would not receive any money from the second distribution under either method. The difference is I now represent some of those low wealth districts. And more importantly, it is just plain wrong for wealthier districts to benefit at the expense of our smaller, more impoverished neighbors. This has never happened before, and I cannot stand by and let this atrocity go unchallenged. Well, I participate in a town hall on a weekly basis regarding the coronavirus. And I shared this opinion on our last telecast. Fortunately and blessedly, our North Carolina representatives were listening, and they picked up the banner and they charged forth. And I want to express my undying gratitude at for our Mecklenburg delegates to have stood up on our behalf, on behalf of CMS, and addressed this with their colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see Ms. De La Hara, and then I see Ms. Cheek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just wanted to speak briefly about from a parent's perspective, and just, I guess, kind of send my gratitude out to my kids' school, in particular schools. I've 2 children in 2 different schools, and I just feel like the teachers, the principals have been sending amazing communications, to my children. They're doing really well. The principal's messaging has been very clear, and I really just couldn't ask for more. So I thank them at that level. I know I've sent a couple one-off emails to other staff members, some who are on the call right now, and you've responded, quickly and thoroughly and taken any suggestions. And I just really want to say thank you for all of the hard work, because I recognize what a huge challenge we've been presented with. And I've just been really impressed with how smoothly things have gone for the most part. I do know that tonight, a couple times it was mentioned that if you don't have a device or you have internet connectivity, to please reach out to your teacher. I would also just add, because I've received some of this feedback from constituents, from fellow parents, that some of the families are struggling that do have connectivity, but because of their life, maybe they have 4 children in the home, ranging from 3-year-olds to 15-year-olds and everywhere in between, and looking to take care of other family members, that also there's been some challenging times. And so I would just encourage, no matter what the reason is, that if you're finding yourself as a parent in a challenging time, to reach out also to your principal or your teacher and make sure that they know, so that that can be captured and taken into consideration, because it's important. I didn't get to mention this earlier, so I will just say briefly, I'm very excited about the premium pay option that we passed tonight. I do think that's so needed, and I'm really grateful for the quick work that the staff did to turn that around and provide those options for us to be able to pass that tonight and get that going for next Monday. And then lastly, I'll just share that I share Ms. Byers-Bailey's concerns. I'm glad that she was able to share what she did this evening. I think maybe some other board members may as well. I won't belabor the point right now, but I did write our State Board of Education members today and express my concern about that as well. So thank you to all that are sharing those thoughts. I appreciate it.
Ms. Cheek, and then I see Mr. Shule.
Thank you. And I'm going to echo all my friends. It's been a remarkable month. We're in April now, and it doesn't seem like that time should have moved because we've all stayed where we were or stayed as close to home as possible. So I've heard a little bit of grumbling this week. I think parents are really starting to feel the pressure and understand what goes on to keep a child engaged all day. So I had a little bit of grumbling about why in the world are you taking spring break next week? We just started learning. And I'd like to remind parents that our teachers were full steam ahead from the minute we said, we're going to have to close, and they need this time to regroup. Some of them need this time to go find that magic toilet paper supply and some of those things that they just haven't had a chance to breathe. And so our staff and our teachers, they need that chance. We're still going to continue moving up forward. We're still working. This board will continue to work, but I just want all the parents to, maybe their schedule can just take a couple notches down in its pace next week as well. I know none of us can go do the things that we might normally want to do during spring break, but potentially next week would be the week that we can kind of scale it back a little bit as families and our staff to try to just do some emotional healing and just emotional rest. So I want to encourage that. Like Miss Delahara and Byers-Bailey, I've been a little fired up about the fact that Mecklenburg County was the one county out of 100. 99 out of 100 got funding in this special way that the formula was adapted, and to hear that one of actually the representative to the state board for our district said he didn't realize how it was going to impact us. How in the world can you represent us if you don't even take the time to figure out how a formula is going to impact you? Very disappointing. We have more students in poverty. We cannot say that enough. We have more students in poverty than any district in North Carolina. We have 4,000 homeless students. We have great wealth and we have great privilege in this county as well. We have cool things like soccer teams coming and sports stadiums and all that stuff. And I think sometimes it makes people in other parts of the state not really think that we have needs. And so I want to make sure that those needs are always addressed. I do appreciate our delegation. I worked a lot with Natasha Marcus, and she really led the charge on the Senate side. And I don't think we're ever going to see that money again because it's been divvied up. But I think that we did get some assurances that they will not do that again when they're looking at how they're distributing funding. So that is some progress. And the outcry did lead to some progress. So that is a good thing. So and the other thing too is tell all the seniors and juniors, Gabe, you're on the list. Make sure you visited the COVID website for the AP exams for the college boards. They've got the schedules up now for when the exams are going to be. They've actually got a lot of the content about what's going to be included in the exams. I know like the lit, it tells you exactly what the writing prompts are going to be and what's going to be included in that 45-minute exam. We've got a lot of students in all grades in high school that are taking those AP classes. And so I want to make sure they don't miss this opportunity to get involved in those classes. I think they're starting May the 12th. So it's plenty of time to study and get ready for those and help CMS to shine in that one. So that is something that's going to be graded and that we need to have. So I just want to say that and tell everybody to take a little bit of extra time over the next 5 days. It's a special weekend for those of us that practice the Christian faith. It's a time of rebirth and rebuilding of our spirits. And so I ask each of you to try to find a way to do that as well and take that time. So, and I thank all of you so much for just the fellowship. And it's, even though we aren't getting out much, it's still good to see all your faces in the Brady Bunch lineup here.
All right, Mr. Schul, and I also just realized your hand is up, Ms. Ship. So we'll do Mr. Schul and then Ms. Ship.
So before I start, I just want to do something that Superintendent Winston did a great job of doing a few meetings ago. But the number for anybody who needs nutritional needs for CMS is 980-343-6041, 980-343-6041. If you have anything nutritional needs, I think CMS has done an amazing job of making sure that we can have those grab and go sites available for kids, anyone who needs it. So make sure you can share that number as much as possible. And also, I don't want to repeat too much what I know we are hearing a lot, right? That this is a national crisis and that we are in situations that we have never been in before. And the fact is, for a lot of us students, that means that we're missing out on opportunities that we definitely consider crucial to our high school experience. And we're missing out on moments that we won't get back. And that is absolutely true. But I also think it's a time to realize that even just by staying at home, And even by not being sick and not being endangered, we can count ourselves lucky. And I think that this is not a vacation. It's not a time to be grateful that we're staying at home. We should treat it with respect. And we should realize that education in this country, in this district, is something that a lot of people around the world would give up a lot for. And I think we need to treat that with respect and realize that we can still work, we can still do what we can. And we also need to realize that sometimes we are lucky, right? We are lucky to be in the positions we are. And we are trying to do everything we can to shift the lens to those who need it most right now.
All right, Ms. Ship, top that.
Yeah, can't do that.
Oh, I want to say, Gabe, that was wonderful. Well said. How about that? And because one of the things is hearing from our students, you all are the most important thing that we think about throughout everything that we do. And so I'm thankful for all the work our superintendent, Ernest Winston, has done, our executive staff, our principals, our assistant principals, our teachers, our support staff, all of those that have made a difference and made it happen through such uncharted waters and uncertainty with the COVID-19. So I'm just thankful for everything that is going on. And I know teachers I've talked to a lot of the teachers and support staff, and they are feeling like they got a lot of support. I have to say that through CMS for being prepared to do what they're doing, to do remote learning and to start anew with new instruction. So I know that's been great. And I can't help but my heart goes out to the seniors. I think about the seniors quite a bit because I know you never thought it would be like this your senior year. But do know that there is always good that comes out of some of our toughest times. And just think about, what are you going to be like coming through this? How strong are you going to be? And prepared are you going to be going into this world and being a great citizen and also being well educated? So take some time to just think about that. And I hope we will be able to look at how we process your grades, whether that's pass, fail, or whether that is just going forward with something else that's still to be determined. And I know that's important. And as you say, testing is going on for our AP students. And I just want to end with, take some time. Spring break is here. And I think we all need some time to take a deep breath and understand what we've all come through. And we're all balancing our world in a way we've never had to before. So take time, enjoy spring break. And I say that to even all my colleagues as well. Let's take time, take a break, and especially during this time. And that's it. Thank you for everything that everyone is doing.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I will echo my colleagues' intense gratitude for our incredible staff and how hard you've all been working and how adeptly you have all been adapting to these extraordinary circumstances. And I want to send my love and support to all the parents and grandparents, family members, community advocates who are juggling untold challenges in order to continue to support their kids through all of this. Some of us are juggling more than others, and it's just remarkable how strong some of you are. And finally, shout out to the kids for the resilience that you are showing. And amen to, hope everyone who can catch their breath over spring break, but especially I want to thank and salute the food service workers who are going to continue to work through spring break to make sure that our kids continue to eat. I want to end on a bright note with my report about a kind of a remarkable opportunity that has come up really because of the school closures for COVID-19. So this is an opportunity for CMS seniors. The Youth Technology Apprenticeship Program, also called YTAC, is a new workforce training program for youth that intertwines esports competition and game development with a custom coding curriculum. This is targeted to high school seniors, CMS seniors who are not currently planning to head to a four-year college. It's a way to expose young people to career pathways in technology and in coding. And it's has a very an economic mobility focus. It's a partnership between Carolina FinTech Hub and CELC in partnership with the Bank of America Foundation, CMS, and the City of Charlotte. They are accepting at least 20 CMS students to be participants in this initial cohort. And if more money can be raised, which hopefully it will be, then it will be a larger number of CMS students in the initial cohort. Here's the connection with the school closings. It was originally planned to launch physically with students meeting in a classroom this summer in July. But given the impact of COVID-19 on our school system, the organizers of this have decided to have it launch earlier and for it to be all virtual, because if you're learning coding and you're doing e-gaming, that's virtual anyways. So they scrambled and sped up the process since our students are home right now anyways, and hopefully have time to fit this into their schedules. So applications are open now, and they'll be open until April 17th. And then the program is going to start up April 20th. So this is starting up right away. And get this, participants in the program will be paid a stipend of over $10 an hour. And while they're participating, they're also going to receive an apprenticeship credential for their resume. And they will have the opportunity to be pre-selected into a technology apprenticeship program called WIN, which is the Workforce Investment Network. So that's sort of the next step after you've done this pre-apprenticeship program. And those apprentices are paid during 6 additional months of full-time coding instruction. And upon completing that, these kids, be a little bit older by then, will be guaranteed jobs at Charlotte's top companies, earning a starting pay of $55,000 a year. So what I love about sharing this opportunity is that I'm seeing how even in the struggle and the turmoil of closing our school buildings and fighting this pandemic, people are finding ways to adapt and to collaborate and to make lemonades out of lemons. And this is some serious lemonade right here. So shout out to Carolina FinTech Hub and to the CELC and to Susan Gannon, CMS, for really hustling to make this happen. So if you know of CMS seniors who are not on the college pathway right now, but have an interest in gaming and technology and coding, please tell them about this and encourage them to sign up. I'm going to give the Instagram page because I know students are more likely to be on Instagram than on Facebook. Just go to FinTech Hub on Instagram and you can get all the details there. And for the grown-ups, if you're on Facebook, just go to my school board, my Elise Ashew school board page. And before I close, I just want to show you, there's been an incredible response to this. So far there have been, or at least as of a few hours ago, there have been
over 100.
125, right? Over 125. And I'm going to show you the leaderboard. I have a leaderboard here of the schools. Let me see if I can you see that? Oh, no, you can't. Oh, well, you can't see it. Well, so I'll just tell you, Philip O'Berry so far has had 23 students sign up. Vance High School has had 18, and then in third place, we've got Olympic with 8 signups. Right behind them, Butler at 7, and then West Meck and Independence have had 6 signups so far. So let's get those numbers up. And like I said, at least 20 students will be participants, and hopefully we can raise more money, and that there will be even more participants than that. So that is my report. I just wanted to end on a future-facing happy note. And with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Do we have any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Peace.
Good night.
Good night.
Take care.